everyone. My name is Alicia Carter. I am honored to have a special guest, Alissa Mwenelupembe, who, as we are producing our first ever Can Amplify podcast, Alissa is the current managing director of NACCE's Early Learning, which includes their accreditation department, professional development, and publications. I invited Alissa to join us today to discuss her upcoming book, Stories of Resilience, Learning from Black Women in Early Care and Education. So, Alissa, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today, Alicia. I'm really excited to both talk about the project, the book, but also just about what does it mean to be a Black woman in our field and what can be challenging and what can also be really bucket filling.
Yeah. How does it feel to know that you're like our first guest? This is our first episode, right? So how does that
I know.
feel?
I didn't know. I didn't know. I feel like, wow, super honored. I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about my journey through the early childhood profession, but the CDA was a part of that journey. And so super honored to be able to be your first guest on your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually like a full circle moment for me because I started my ECE journey at NACCE in the accreditation department.
Nice. Nice.
So I felt like this was just like a real coming moment for me where it's like, oh, this is awesome to be able to kind of like um, just share that lens or just to share that part of the field, right? To have those experiences. My experience obviously would be very different than yours, but for me, I started off as like a coordinator and then I kind of worked up a little bit. And then I got to a point where it's like, I kind of need to like expand my experience in the field because I started my ECE journey at NACCE. And that's like a very different way than most people start their journey in the field. Um, and so then to like have this book that I saw I started reading it and I love it. Like I am a big fan of anthologies. I love that you are highlighting these very different women that I'm not even sure other people would have known without you being able to bring their voice to this project for you. And so I truly appreciate that. And it just resonates, right, with like some of my experience, but I am sure a whole host of Black women that are in the field. Um, so enough about myself. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and yourself and what what got you into ECE? Like what led you through that journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going on, gosh, I have to count the years. I'm in my, 20 something year of working in early childhood education. And I feel like I have one of those stories in ECE that's really like typical, but also when people like know what I do for a living now, working as a managing director for early learning at NAEYC, they think like, oh, you're like a real person. Like you're like, I have a normal ECE story. And I do. So I got into early childhood because I just graduated high school and it was the summer before college and I needed a job. Like I needed some cash for the summer. And my mom said, why don't you go up the street and work at the daycare because you like kids and they're hiring. And basically, she knew the person that was the director at the time. So I did, and I ended up working in a 2-year-old classroom for that summer where I came in at 18 years old as the assistant teacher in a 2-year-old classroom. Very shortly after I started that role as the assistant teacher, the lead teacher left and I became the lead teacher, which I think is a pretty normal sort of a thing to happen in early childhood. Is like you just decide one day this is something you're interested in, and all of a sudden you find yourself like, oh, I'm in charge of this group of children, and I just started doing this. I don't even know what I'm doing right now.
Right.
So that college job that really I had no intention of this being my profession. I My bachelor's degree that I was going to school for was in English literature. Which, another kind of full circle moment here where I had started off thinking like, I'm going to go into publishing, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be all these things. And I just really felt connected with the early childhood space when I came in. Like the people really connected with me. I found mentors in the space really early that saw like my potential, and they continue to just help me to guide my path. But the majority of my career I spent working inside early learning programs. So as a teacher, as a director mostly, and then I spent quite a bit of time working alongside early childhood programs where I worked in I'm from Indiana, and I worked in Indiana's QRIS system as a coach and a mentor, where I worked alongside both center directors and teachers, but also family child care providers. So I really am grateful for the diverse experience that I've had in ECE, because I feel like when I come to a table now, I bring all of those voices with me. I bring my, center directors that I lived that life for 15 years. I bring the educators that work in the classroom and the hard work that they do. I bring family child care to the table because I spent so much time working alongside with them, helping them to think about what quality could look like in their space that was really different than a center-based program. And I think that that's unique, and I try to like remind myself that that's unique. That not everybody that sits at the level that I sit at in our early childhood field have that firsthand experience of what it feels like to actually do the work.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, all of us, I feel like, that are in the field have passion for the field overall, right? But what has been your biggest why to keep pushing through with all of the barriers and obstacles that you faced? What has been your guiding light?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound cheesy, but it's the children. Like it truly is the children. When I came into early childhood, the very first day, I needed a job. That was the reality. I needed a job. I'm from a huge family. My mom is one of 14. I have, hundreds at this point, cousins and like children that I grew up with and spent time with. And so I was like always, I'm the oldest, I'm the second oldest grandchild. So I was like the babysitter. And so I did spend a lot of time with children growing up. But one of the things that really kind of cemented for me, like this is important work, was I have three siblings who are much younger than me. I was 10 years older than my next sibling growing up. And my youngest sibling is 20 years younger than me. So, I was going through my kind of adolescence, entering the early childhood space where these little children that were my siblings were growing up. And my middle brother struggled a lot in school. It just was never a place that felt comfortable for him. He had needs that teachers weren't necessarily ready or willing to meet. And I would say my oldest brother also had some disabilities that weren't always handled appropriately in the
Mm,
classroom. And as I learned more about child development, and as I learned more about quality teaching practices, I was then able to identify like, actually these are the things that they should be doing. These are the things that teachers should be helping. And I was able to really help my mom to like act as an advocate for my brothers in their school experience. And then as I got older, I have two kids of my own, and seeing how their early learning experiences have really shaped them. Right now they're teenagers, and to see who they are now, because I knew so much more about young children at that point than I ever had before, and that I could be very thoughtful and intentional about what experiences they had. And I mean, I joked a lot with the caregivers that they had. They primarily went to family child care homes growing up. They spent some time in centers because I worked in centers, and they would come to the center that I worked at. But the majority of their early childhood experiences were in family child care homes. And to see how I was able to not only provide my children with a really high quality experience, I was also able to like support that educator, that family child care provider, to say, hey, here's what I'm working on right now. Like, let's try it. I will always
Mhm.
remember going. They had a caregiver named Jennifer. She ran a family childcare home, and she had to go to like the doctor or something someday, and she was really struggling. Like, how's she going to be able to, not have to close her home for the day so she could have this appointment? And I said, oh, well, I'll come. I'll take the day off and I'll come and I'll be your substitute. And like, obviously, I'm qualified to be able to do that. And so to be able, and her assistant was there too. And so it wasn't just me with these like strange kids who all knew me. My kids went there. And I remember her coming back to me, being on in their outdoor space where they had this big climber. And the climber, like the kids weren't generally allowed to go up into the climber, because it was, I don't know, it was attached to a swing set. So they used the swings, but they didn't actually go up because it was really tall and it made her nervous. I mean, that was the main thing. And at that point, I was really, really engrossed in learning about big body play and risky play and like doing some really deep research and training around that. And so like I saw an opportunity there of like, okay, these kids want to go up into that tall space. How can I, as the educator, support their natural curiosity, their desire to have this big body movement? And so like we figured out a way where like, we talked it through to say, okay, if you feel comfortable to climb up there, then you can, but I'm not going to help you to climb up there. So you have to be able to do it yourself. And the children are like navigating, like, how can do I feel comfortable with this? Is this safe for me? And I was there all the time. I could easily get to them if they needed me to. And I remember her coming back and like looking at me like, what the heck are you doing, Alissa? But it was like great. And we were able to have this really rich dialogue of like, here's why I supported this experience. And like, what might you think about, as these children are going to talk about this and they're going to think about this again. And I mean, luckily I had some experience supporting educators to like think through their own like biases and their own hesitations around the work that they were doing. And so like it was a really safe space for her and I to be able to have that conversation. And for Oslo to say like, oh, I wish you hadn't done that. I'm not ready. And I'm like, you are ready. We're going to do this. So, I mean, I think that professionally, I've just really been able to leverage both what I know because I've gone to school and I've learned these things, but also like, what does it mean to then have this like human connection that can help to support all of the ideas and the philosophies and the content that we know. And I think I learned that through some of my experiences learning more about early childhood education. I mean, I started in this field going to school for a bachelor's degree in English. No early childhood coursework. I had to get that later. And the CDA was one way that I started my journey of my early childhood coursework. I became a director for a program, and in Indiana, licensing rules state that you have to have 12 hours of early childhood education coursework to be able to be a director. And so they put me on a plan to do that. And the first thing I did was get a CDA. I did my coursework at the community college. I got my CDA, and it really did help me to then kind of have a jumping off point to say like, okay, what do I want to do in this profession, which led to a master's degree and now is leading to a doctorate. So, I mean, I think that there's so many paths that we can go down in this profession. That's one of the things I love about it, is that you can really kind of choose your own adventure of what you want to do and where you want to sit in this profession and still be able to do that and contribute.
That's great. I want to ask you a question. It's not in the list that we that I sent, but you talked a lot about mentorship and you providing mentorship, but you also being on the receiving end of that. How important was that to you and your career, and you being able to kind of make a space for yourself in this field?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was essential. So even that very first job as a 2-year-old teacher, I had a great director. Her name was Emily. My coworkers really like were frustrated with her a lot because she pushed them, but I was like a sponge. I'm like, tell me everything. I'm going to soak it up. Let me watch how you move in this space. Let me watch how you are, talking through these things. I came in with no ego. I knew nothing. Like, teach me everything. I want to learn it. And I think that was the place where then I decided, like, okay, let me see how I can do that job. That's been something that has been kind of consistent for me throughout my career of like, okay, I find myself in this space and I look around and I think like, where do I see this taking me? Let me identify where I want to go and let me just study that person deeply, but also to have women around me that see my goals and my aspiration not as threatening, not as unproductive, but to say like, okay, this girl's going places. How do I help her to do that? And so I had many wonderful mentors in my career, starting with Emily, the first director I worked under. I had a mentor named Becky Trella, who has passed away now, but worked with me in my first director's job. She was my mentor who was assigned to me through the quality improvement project in Indiana. But she was so open and honest with me and supportive in that. Also, I came in just saying like, this is what I want to do. This is where I see I want to go. How do I get there? And then it moved into probably the mentor that has given me the most, has introduced me to the most possibility in my life is Margie Carter, who many people in the early childhood field know. And I mean, really just put me in front of people and in places that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And so, this is one of those things that I think is important about both the book, but also just about our early childhood profession, and that those three women who opened doors for me and pulled out chairs at the table for me, all white women. And what we know about our field is many women, many people in power in the early childhood profession are white women. And I'm asking these white women who have these seats of power to look around and see who's standing on the outside, and how do you make it your goal to support the profession by stepping aside sometimes, pulling out the chair, opening the door. Because I mean, as Black women in this space, we don't usually have the power to be able to make the space for ourselves. And so we really need our elders in the space to create that path for us. And I feel like where I'm at right now, because I've had those opportunities, now I can make opportunities, and I'm constantly like looking around to see who's standing right outside the door, who's standing behind me at the table that I can bring forth. And I hope to see a world where the table's just going to be more diverse all the time.
Yeah. So I think that leads us to like a great segue into my next question, which is why we're here, right? It's about your book. You have this new upcoming book coming out that's getting ready to be released. So what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so it actually is 100% released now. It's available. I got
Oh,
my copy in the mail. It's
nice.
real. It just started shipping like last week. So if you've already pre-ordered, you should have your copy soon if you don't already. So I write about this in the book, but the reason why it even came into existence is because of a conversation that my friend Kelly Ramsey and I had at a NACCE conference, and Kelly's story is in the book as well. And she's been a dear friend and a colleague for a long time. But I remember I was on the NACCE governing board at the time. It was before I came on the staff. I was on the governing board, and she was one of the NACCE affiliate advisory council members. We were both presenting at the conference that time. We had been in this field for a long time. We'd done a lot of things, and we're sitting in the hallway at the convention center, like between sessions or during a session, catching up. And, we just had this moment where thinking about who we are, what seats we were sitting in. And I just said, Kelly, how did we get here? And she was the one that introduced me to the Shirley Chisholm quote about bringing your seat with you. And she said, Alissa, because we always show up, if there's not a seat for us, we bring a folding chair. And I mean, that really just struck me to think about. I know my story. I know how I inserted myself and showed up to conversations where I wasn't sure if I was welcome or even wanted, but I just kept showing up because I felt like eventually somebody's going to get up and I'm going to be ready to hop in that seat as soon as they get up. And it just made me wonder, what are other people's stories? Like I knew some of them because of, just friends and talking about our own experiences, but sometimes those are the sorts of stories that we only tell like to one or two people, or we tell in certain areas. And I just felt like there was a need for a wider group of people to really understand the effort and the energy that it's taken for people like me, people like Kelly, to actually be able to show up to these spaces, knowing that we aren't always welcome, knowing that we aren't always wanted to be there, but we know we need to be there. And to really help people understand what that experience feels like. And so that's where, I started just kind of with an idea of, I feel like this is something, I feel like I want to, I feel like I want to know these stories. And one of the quotes that I share in the book is a Toni Morrison quote that I carry with me always is, if you can't find the book that you want to read, then you need to write it. And so like, this was the story that I felt like nobody had told yet. And so like, here was an opportunity to be able to tell it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I told you I've started reading the book, and it really resonated. The different stories, the different essays from these women, and the obstacles that they've had to overcome, not just professionally but personally, and to still show up and to be there. And so what I noticed was that there's a running theme of being at the table, right? So what does that mean? Share with our audience like what that means to you and why it was such an important topic to kind of run with throughout this series of essays.
Yeah, I mean, so it started with that Shirley Chisholm quote of like, how do we just end up here? And so that was the prompt that I gave all of them. And I wanted this to be a diverse set of stories and voices, because the reality is we have some commonalities, but we're all individuals. We all have unique experiences. And I think that that's really important, especially as we're talking about Black people or people of color, of like, we're not a monolith. We all have unique stories. We all have unique experiences, either if that's because of where we live or how we were raised or what our educational experiences were. But there are things that we're all experiencing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it was important to me that each person that contributed like be able to approach the same problem in a different way, because I think that also makes it more powerful, and that like, oh, well, this person, had like a really, strong experience, early childhood experience. They, didn't deal with issues of poverty. They didn't, like, they had everything that they should have, and they're still having this experience. This person, grew up in a different country, and they, had these experiences, but still the same shared experience. And so for me, it was about the seat at the table is really like a metaphor for me of like, how do we have a voice in the conversation? So I think there's lots of ways like we could talk about that, but it's about, do you feel like your voice is heard? Are you a part of decision-making processes? Are you able to contribute to the future of our work, as opposed to being just responsible for doing the thing? Like, how are we a part of the planning and the not just the execution of the work, but also like how we're thinking about it? And I mean, I feel really grateful right now to be in the space that I am at NACCE, where that's an intentional focus of Michelle Kang, our CEO, of making sure that our leadership team, our executive team, is actually representative of our field, that we have people that are at the table with the lived experiences that are going to connect and resonate to educators out in the field, program leaders, family childcare providers, to say, like, actually, we are you, and we can help to advance our profession in a way that feels right for this moment of where we are, and not relying on kind of how we've done things historically. And so what I love about all of these women, the 12 women that came together, me included, that having that seat at the table looks different for all of them, because the contributors to the book are educators in a classroom. So, like, where do you find your seat at the table? Where do you find a leadership opportunity in a classroom? Because there are leaders in our classrooms. Where do you find that in higher ed? Where do you find it in an entrepreneur? Jarletha is an entrepreneur who has built a business because of her commitment to this field of education. Some of us are at national organizations. Some of us are at, smaller organizations. So just to know that, like, the seat at the table doesn't always mean you're the CEO of a company. Sometimes the seat at the table means that you are advocating for high quality practices with young children, and you're demonstrating how to make that happen in your classroom.
I love that. I love that you featured women in all of the different, roles that they could play in this. Because I think whenever we think about leadership in any field, really, right, it is about being, someone's supervisor or director or CEO, right, and white. But I love that you included some individuals that are still in the classroom. They've been in the classroom. This is where they want to be. And how do they show up to that table? How do they bring the table or create the table or make space for themselves at that table? And I really, I love that it can show others that are just starting out to get their CDA, or really, haven't decided where else they may want to go, but they're here, right? How do I make my voice important, and how do I get it heard? So sharing those stories, I've really appreciated reading the vast differences in where they're at, right? Or creating something all on your own, like you mentioned, Shirley, like creating something that didn't exist and you making it yourself, right? Writing the book that you wanted to read that you couldn't find. So thank you really for this. I think I'm like probably halfway through. So have been enjoying it so far. I know I'm going to enjoy, continuing it until I finish. Um, we've already said that the book is released now. So where can people purchase the book? Where can they get it?
Yeah, so the book is published by Exchange Press, and so you can go to the Exchange Press website. They've done a really nice job at marketing our work. So you go to their website, and it's on the front page. Stories of resistance, learning from Black women in early care and education. It looks like this. $24 is the price on it, but if you just go to exchangepress.com, you can find it.
Thank you. Thank you. And so my last question is, with the different audiences that you will have that read this, what are, I'm not going to leave it at one. What are your two hopes? What are the two things that you hope readers will walk away with?
Yeah. So I really want Black women to see themselves in this book, to see that their experience is highlighted in some way, that their voice, even if it's not their voice in the book, that their voice is elevated. And that was one of the things we really talked about with the cover art. I'm going to hold up the book again because the cover art is just so beautiful. I'm so proud of it. And Chelsea Parker at Exchange did a magnificent job. But we had a lot of conversations about this image, and did this feel like a representative image of the experience? And I really believe that it does. I think that most Black women will connect to this image and see themselves here. So I definitely want Black women to say, like, this is us, this is me, I see myself here. I also really hope that white women, who are our other large group in our early childhood profession, I hope that they can take some time to read, to reflect, and to think about how they might be able to support the women who are around them who are not white. And we have some great reflection questions after each essay to really dig deeper into the story, into what it means. But I think this is just an opportunity to just pause and think about where you see yourself, whether you see yourself as the storyteller or you see yourself as another voice that either offered support or a barrier, and really think about how you might use that going forward and how you approach your own work.
Well, thank you, Alissa. I enjoyed talking with you today, just hearing more about not just the book, but, about you and your story, what kind of got you here. um, and just some of the different, perspectives that you were able to lend um, and assist with, getting these voices heard. Because this was, I think, really important work that I'm not sure maybe other people have thought about it, but I thought it came together in a great way. So thank you again. I appreciate you taking time to speak with me today. And I can't wait to share this with our community.
Yes.
So
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I look forward to future conversations because, like, this is one book. These are 12 stories. I think I could spend the rest of my life collecting these stories and maybe still not be done. So I hope that this just, is a jumping off point for other people to be able to think about how they share their stories.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time today. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And I will be sending you an invitation to join our CAN community, which is where this podcast is going to live.
I'm already a member.
You are? That's great. Oh, that's you've been enjoying our community so far. Um, and if if our listeners, right, wanted to connect with you outside of the community, obviously in the community is a great way to do that. But if they wanted to connect with you on another way, how would they be able to do that?
Yeah, I think probably the best way to connect with me would be probably through email. And my email address is Mwenelupembe, first letter and my last name, at naeyc.org. You can always go onto the NACY website and look under leadership, and you'll see our staff, and you can connect with me from there.
All right. All right. Not to mention you're on LinkedIn because that's how I got connected with you.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't think of that one. That would actually be better. Connect with me on LinkedIn.
So connect with her on LinkedIn, everyone. Okay. Start there.
I forget about LinkedIn sometimes. Yeah, no, definitely LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. Love to connect, send me a message. I'd also love to hear your story. I mean, that's the thing. I'm around, I'm out, I'm visiting programs, I'm at conferences. And so, like, if you see me, come say hi. I was at the Southern Early Childhood Association conference last weekend, and I got in really late. I flew out of DC after work, and I was having some dinner in the hotel bar, and somebody was at the table next to me, and they're like, "Alissa, it's you. I watch your videos." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I love to talk people. I love to hear, what you're working on, what you're interested in. I'm a real live human being. And sometimes if you catch me at, the hotel bar at 9 o'clock, I'm probably wearing jeans and a t-shirt and no makeup. And, I'm a real person. So that's really important to me, that I'm accessible to people, and that, because I am you, and I've gone through this journey, and I definitely want to be there to support others who are interested in what their own professional journey looks like.
I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting with you another time.
Great. Thank you, Alicia.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.